Hey everybody, welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. I'm Rockin' Robbie Billups, and today we're going to be talking about my top 5 favorite Superman comics. That's right, everybody. Welcome to Robbie's Top 5. Today we're going to be talking about my personal top 5 favorite Superman comics. You know, Superman may not always seem to be the coolest or hippest character out there. At times, Superman's popularity has definitely waned, but I ultimately think that Superman is one of the best superheroes out there. I think he represents the inspiration to the greatest of potential within each and every single one of us to sacrifice ourselves for truth and justice, things like that, right? He may seem like a Boy Scout, like a goody two-shoes, but I think a little bit of that is needed. And if you're looking for something to get into Superman, if you've never read a Superman comic, you want to start somewhere really strong and fresh and things like that, if you want to be inspired by reading something, these are the books I'm definitely going to recommend to you that involve Superman. So my top 5 favorite Superman comics. Number 5 is Superman Last Son by Geoff Johns, Richard Donner, and Adam Kubert. So right after Infinite Crisis, which was like a sequel of sorts to Crisis on Infinite Earth, DC heads, you know what I'm talking about. The DC universe had shifted a little bit. Maybe reality changed, so they had to set up a new universe for Superman. And after not having his powers for a year, in which the miniseries 52 took place, Geoff Johns and Kurt Busiek did a story called Up, Up, and Away, where it reintroduced Superman and Superman's mythology, his villains, his rogues gallery, right? All that stuff. I love Superman. I think he's got one of the strongest rogues galleries out there. So they did the story Up, Up, and Away to set things up. And then in Action Comics, Geoff Johns took over, and he did a story called Last Son with Richard Donner, who of course directed Superman the movie. He also basically directed Superman 2. There is a full Richard Donner cut of that available, though he was kind of kicked off the project after Superman 1 was released, and Richard Lester came in and kind of finished a little bit of Superman 2. But it's still very much a Donner film, right? You got beautiful artwork by Adam Kubert in this story. I love it. It's ethereal when it needs to be. It's very solid when it needs to be as well. Conveys the strength of Superman and the ferocity of Superman and the things that go on around him, right? But the story basically involves the idea that there's another survivor from Krypton, a small kid, right? And Superman finds this kid, Lois and Clark adopt this kid, and then they find out it's actually the child of General Zod. That's right, so Zod, Ursa, and Non make their first post-Infinite Crisis appearance, right? You got Richard Donner along for the ride. It's definitely a throwback to that Christopher Reeve movie. This whole era of Superman kind of felt like that, and I really, really liked it, especially the book that came before it, Up, Up, and Away. Also, Geoff Johns did some great work after this with Escape from Bizarro World. The Brainiac story is exceptional, Legion of Superheroes. He also kind of redefined a little bit of the origin of Superman in a book called Secret Origin with Gary Frank. Gary Frank did some of those other works as well. Kubert's artwork here, though, is phenomenal. I really, really like it. I like the story. It hits home. It's really big, it's explosive, and I love General Zod, and this is one of my favorite comic books with that character. At number 4, we got Superman for All Seasons, written by Jeff Loeb with art by Tim Sale. This book is phenomenal. It's great. It's basically a Superman Year 1, but it's a very sentimental journey into Superman. Whereas a Batman Year 1's got to be dark, and it's got to be gritty, and it's got to be filled with all that kind of stuff. Superman's a little bit different. It's light. It's a little bit more airy. And the artwork by Tim Sale completely shows this forward. By the way, Bjorn Hansen's colors are fantastic, and they really elevate Sale's work to the next level, and it really works with something like mimicking a Rockwell painting or something like that. This is Middle America. This is Superman at his earliest, his formative years. It definitely tells the first year of Superman's life, and for All Seasons, and it does it in 4 issues, but it's all collected in one graphic novel. But there's spring, summer, fall, and winter. It works so well. Jeff Loeb was at the peak of his career at this point, seriously pumping out great work every single time. He really had a knack for Superman. He did a run shortly after on Superman, along with Joe Kelly over on Action Comics. It really was just fantastic. In my opinion, led to things like Our World's at War, Brainiac, Y2K, things like that. Really fun, exceptional stuff. This book is amazing, though. It's very heartfelt. It's got a great exploration between the dynamic of Luthor and Metropolis and Superman. Basically, the love triangle of Superman has never involved Lois Lane. It's always been Luthor, Superman, and Metropolis. I love this work. It's fantastic in my opinion. Number 3 is going to be Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, written by Alan Moore with artwork by Kurt Swan. It was also inked the first issue by George Perez, and the second issue was inked by Kirk Schaeffenberger. Perez, of course, was at the height of his career. He wanted to ink Swan. Schaffenberger had been doing Superman books forever. He had been a veteran inker on the title, but never really quite got the chance to ink Kurt Swan, who had definitely cemented himself as the Superman artist over the last 35 to 40 years or so, right? And bringing in Alan Moore, Julie Schwartz put this together. Basically, what was going on is that DC Crisis on Infinite Earths was happening, and everything was going to be kind of rebooted and relaunched, especially with Superman, because John Byrne was going to be taking over Superman and reintroducing him to a new generation of readers shortly after, and even during that time that this book was kind of coming out. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but this was basically the last two issues, the last issue of Superman, the last issue of Action Comics, of that original old-school Golden Age Superman. It was definitely a farewell tribute to it, but it was exceptionally done. It has all the feels. If you just have the slightest inkling of who Superman is and who the characters around him are and who his villains are, this story is going to impact you in a way that's going to make you almost get emotional. It's really good. It's got crazy emotional scenes involving Krypto and Supergirl. It's basically the last Superman story, and they bring in Alan Moore, who's in the middle of writing Watchmen. He comes in and pens these two issues, and it's amazing. Swan's artwork feels classic, but it feels still refined and modern, even of its time, but it's got that perfect sense. It's an imaginary story. It's very touching. It's very sentimental, but it's also very dark and very foreboding, and it's just really impactful for just two issues. Superman, written by Alan Moore, for instance, Alan Moore's only done like a handful of Superman tales, and they are absolutely some of the best, and this is no exception. Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow comes in at number 3. Number 2 is going to be Superman, Man of Steel, or should I just say Man of Steel? The Man of Steel was a 1986 miniseries by John Byrne. He wrote and drew the project. He came in to kind of reinvigorate Superman post Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, post DC Crisis. So post Crisis, Superman comes in. He's going to take away some of all the backstory, all the tangled webs, going to knock out some things, depower Superman a little bit, and this miniseries, Man of Steel, reintroduced the Man of Steel to a new generation, and I was in that generation. This is the first Superman stuff I ever read, so to me, I really hold it close to my heart. I love John Byrne's pencils. They're amazing. Everything you love about John Byrne is there. He had just come off successful runs in the X-Men and Fantastic Four. He would continue to keep going and doing successful things like Namor, in my opinion. I love that book. And Next Men. I think Next Men is a little bit underrated. But John Byrne was an exceptional talent, especially in the 80s. He really brought a passion to Superman. He kind of stripped some things down, laid some things bare, but the essence of the character was there. It was very relatable. And the most important thing to me about John Byrne's Superman is it really made Lex Luthor a great villain, because he was now a corporate mogul, and Superman couldn't touch him because of all the bureaucracy and all the legal battles and things like that. I love this version of Superman. It's something that Jeff Loeb really relished in Superman for All Seasons, which we talked about just a couple minutes ago. But John Byrne just completely redefined Superman for me. This was my Superman. He went to the movie, he did a little bit of his own thing, he went to the classic Superman, he just put together this perfect encapsulation of who Superman, who Kal-El, who Clark Kent actually are, the world that surrounds him, and setting up the villains. And he had a very successful run after that I completely adore. At number 1, my most favorite Superman comic book of all time is All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely, with colors by Jamie Grant. You can't forget the colors in this book. Grant's colors are amazing and add an element to this book that's completely necessary and set the tone and the mood. You think of things like, say, the Passion of the Christ and the thoughts that entail. This is like the Passion of the Christ, but with Superman. This is the passion of the Superman. Grant Morrison completely understands the character of Superman and what he represents inside each individual and for all of us as a collective whole. And he definitely has that come across in a very impactful way in this story. Frank Quitely's artwork is detailed, stylistic, and just so appropriate. It's simple, but it's also deceptive in its simplicity because it's a very complex style, leaves a lot of room to breathe, but it's very essential to the story that the art is just the way it is. Superman has never been characterized better in a comic book for me than All-Star Superman. He doesn't really have too many cares in the world except for your cares. Seriously, this is a dude that nothing can hurt him. So all he cares about is the stuff that can hurt us. And it's absolutely inspiring and it's amazing. The basic gist of the story is that Superman realizes he's got a year left to live. How does Superman spend his last year? It's touching, it's violent, it's tragic, and it's epic, and it's inspiring, and it's heroic. And I can't think of a single comic book that encapsulates the goodness of Superman and who that character is and what he represents to us as a whole, as a society, and each individually inside the deepest recesses of our souls is All-Star Superman. I love this book. Grant Morrison, of course, is my favorite comic book writer, but this book is exceptional. To me, reading this book is a spiritual experience. So that's my top 5. That's what I think about Superman comics. I want to hear what your top 5 is because there's a lot of great stuff out there. We were talking about Up, Up, and Away. Don't forget about Birthright. Don't forget about so many other good books. Like we were talking about Patrick Gleason and Peter Tomasi. Superman and Son is inching its way up there into the top 10 for me, guys, for real, seriously. So I want to know what your favorite Superman comics are. Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Please do join us next time on Robbie's Top 5. We're going to look and spotlight in on Vault Comics, a new publisher that does sci-fi and fantasy comic books that I absolutely adore. I'm going to be talking about my top 5 favorite current Vault comics. Did I say Valiant? I hope I didn't. Vault Comics, my top 5 favorite Vault Comics in the next Robbie's Top 5. Thank you guys so much for liking, sharing, and subscribing. We appreciate everything. Join us at popculturephilosophers.com for podcasts and a whole lot more. I've been Rockin' Robbie Billups. Thanks for rocking with us. Keep on top 5.